Welcome to the Obama Presidential Center, as designed and debated by social science students from the University of Chicago within a class offered in the winter quarter of 2016 called Temple or Forum, Debating and Designing the Obama Presidential Center. The class began with a quick but intensive survey of the literature on the anthropology museums. The title of the course cites a prevailing pattern in the history of museums. They typically function either like a forum or a temple to the community that uses it. More often than not, museums are temple-like, elevated, guarded, occupying liminal park areas. They signify spaces of the sacred, where ideologies are produced, preserved, and perpetuated. Presidential libraries and museums are universally of the temple persuasion. As residents in Hyde Park, as social theorists, and as receptive audiences to the diction of the Obama Presidential Center, not library or museum, the class accepted the formulation of the OPC exhibits and architecture as a forum, as a mandate. Each exhibit was designed around a single controversy. This does not mean controversy in the popular sense of the word, with its negative connotations of sensationalism and scandal. Controversy in our sense is an object of debate, discussion, and discourse, the intended yield of a forum, not a temple-oriented presidential center. The students drew from Bruno Latour's observations that we live in controversies and we do not know how to spatialize them. Thus, the class chose 3 controversies that it determined would yield ongoing debate in the forum of the Obama Presidential Center: race, the Affordable Care Act, and immigration.
Entering the exhibit from MLK Drive, visitors can exit their bus transit and immediately experience the exhibit on President Obama, Race, and America. There is not a Black America and White America, a Latino America and Asian America. There's only the United States of America. This quote from The Audacity of Hope, placed over the presidential seal, grounds the exhibit and is exemplative of President Obama's inclusive approach to policies related to equality and opportunity in America. The exhibit starts by grounding President Obama as a man, and as the political leader he would become. Standing on the shoulders of heritage is meant to explore the influence of the African American community on President Obama as an individual, as well as the importance of his racial heritage to his express identity. I am a prisoner of my own biography. Born to a white American mother and a black father from Kenya, President Obama chooses to identify as an African American. As is true for all Americans, in both of his books, President Obama expresses his struggle with carving out his own identity as constitutive and separate from his heritage. In one phrase, incorporating race without limits. I was drawn to the power of the African American religious tradition to spur social change. President Obama took his place in a long tradition of African American political action and social leadership. These 2 panels explore his place in that ongoing tradition, symbolically exemplified by his participating in the 50th anniversary of the March on Selma, and on his own religious faith expressed in his eulogy given in Charleston, South Carolina, after the devastating racially motivated mass shooting at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. I never emulate white men and brown men whose fates don't speak to my own. Again highlighting President Obama's nuanced and individual approach to his own racial identity as a person. This section features an interactive timeline of African American leaders President Obama himself identifies as being formative and influential to his political career. In this section, Chicago Roots, strategically looking out over the south side of Chicago and the L line serving the OPC, visitors can explore and learn about Barack and Michelle Obama's roots, career, and community action in Chicago, where President Obama first launched his political career. A change is brought about because ordinary people do extraordinary things. 2 large, detailed statues of Barack and Michelle Obama look over Southside Chicago. By standing next to them and taking in the vista, visitors can reflect on President Obama's career in Chicago. An interactive map allows visitors to explore Barack and Michelle Obama's time in Chicago. Each section will have expansive content, and each side of the panel features the same map. A 4-sided video wall displays visitor responses from questions asked at the end of the exhibit, which helps bring the larger narrative of identity into the exhibit while also allowing visitor experiences to qualify the content in the exhibit itself. If there's a child on the south side of Chicago who can't read, that matters to me. Quoted from President Obama's famous 2004 speech, visitors can watch the full speech where President Obama talks about many of the themes of his time in Chicago and how they relate to his broader vision for America. Facing prejudice. Visitors descend into a room below the main floor, where they experience two separate components delineating the prejudicial aspects of the shooting deaths of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, as well as how President Obama responded to those events, which continue to shape racial discourse in America today. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. Considered a pivotal moment in President Obama's career, after the shooting death of Trayvon Martin, President Obama spoke directly to the American public about racial profiling and systemic bias in the country at large. Visitors can watch video of that speech symbolically projected onto a 3D hoodie that became a symbol of the prejudice surrounding Trayvon's death. We're never so outraged as when a cabbie drives past us, or when the woman in an elevator clutches her purse. From Dreams of My Father, this quote exemplifies the discourse that occurred after the shooting death of Michael Brown at the hands of Ferguson police. Situated on the museum floor, this quote becomes an obstacle in itself, symbolically representing the obstacles introduced to American society by racial prejudice and stereotyping. We believe ourselves to be a tolerant people, even as racial, religious, and cultural tensions roil the landscape. Visitors can explore the emergent Black Lives Matter movement and its associated social media hashtag that became a microscope for individuals to use in exposing not just racism, but other social injustices. The interactive component will have examples of the movement and the hashtags used throughout its history as well as the present today. Fighting inequality. Metalinguistically parallel facing prejudice, visitors will emerge from the thematically narrow section prior to a broader section detailing the ways President Obama has tried to address widespread inequality faced by numerous communities in America today. When we as a society pretend that poor children will fulfill their potential in dilapidated, unsafe schools with outdated equipment and teachers who aren't trained in their subjects they teach, we are perpetrating a lie on these children and on ourselves. Here, visitors can explore two panels related to President Barack Obama's Race to the Top, his personal version of No Child Left Behind, and My Brother's Keeper, a national mentorship program meant to help African American and Latino youth through the college and job search process. Fighting Inequality features one of the most advanced interactive components in the exhibit, a holographic table where visitors can explore the many statistics and trends related to inequality across various communities in America today. The large center panel is controlled by a smaller touchscreen, while the additional corners of the holographic table include smaller graphs and data that visitors can explore at their own leisure. Text becomes object with a representative statue of the United States that includes a quote from President Obama explaining the overarching vision for America that constitutes his approach to policies meant to address inequality and opportunity in America today. In Race Today, visitors are given the opportunity to express their own views on racial identity and discourse in America. This section encourages visitors to express lessons learned from the exhibit, as well as their own experiences and opinions. Visitors are able to record their reactions to 3 questions under the open supervision of a museum docent. In the background of the video, viewers will see the overarching quote meant to brand the message of the exhibit as well as the center itself. Turning around, visitors can see other reactions to the same questions, divided amongst 3 separate screens, each sorted by question. These videos will be playing as visitors gaze upon them. Their Bluetooth audio devices will begin broadcasting the audio. The questions are as follows. What importance does race still play in discourse? How has President Obama changed the way we talk about race? What makes up your identity? Ultimately, visitors will leave with a clearer understanding of the role of race and identity in their lives, President Obama's life, and in America as a whole.
Welcome to the Obama Presidential Center, located on Chicago's South Side. Our exhibit focuses on the Affordable Care Act, one of President Obama's key campaign goals and what is sure to be a vital part of President Obama's enduring legacy. Special attention to accessibility for the differently abled has been taken in the crafting of this exhibit, as well as allowing for multiple levels of understanding the information presented. Available at the entrance to the exhibit, visitors are able to pick up iPads and iPad minis, equipped with headphones and accessibility settings for a wide range of abilities. The iPads host an app which acts as both companion and enhancement to the Affordable Care Act exhibit for visitors to the exhibit, as well as offering a walkthrough of the exhibit for individuals visiting virtually. The app comes preloaded with videos of a variety of individuals giving additional information and personal testimonials about each room in the exhibit. All exhibits are presented in this alternative format, allowing individuals who are dealing with a range of impairments to interact with and get the most out of the exhibit. Visitors may also pick up an electronic pin at this station. The pin's placement on visitors' clothing allows information on multimedia displays to be presented at the height of the visitor. The exhibit begins with a chronology of past healthcare legislation, the presentation of which is influenced by the research of Tina Rapola. The labyrinthian design, inspired by the work of Peter Eisenman, reflects the confusion and uncertainty in healthcare before the passage of the Affordable Care Act. The wall immediately to the right when you first enter the exhibit reads, "I am not the first to take up this cause, but I am determined to be the last." This is a quote from President Barack Obama before a joint session of Congress in 2009, providing a context for his goals within United States history. Displayed on the opposite wall, visitors then can see early 20th century thoughts on the role of healthcare in government and society through the actions of President Theodore Roosevelt in 1906 with the Pure Food and Drug Act, which placed pharmaceuticals and food within the purview of the government and established a predecessor to the Food and Drug Administration. Pillars throughout the room provide information on past presidents who enacted significant legislation concerning health care, and touchscreens along the pillars allow for visitors to engage with media corresponding to the respective dates and topics. Semi-translucent walls and screens connect these pillars and the larger narratives of healthcare with a mixture of projections, engraved words, and images of diverse people from various backgrounds. As visitors flow in and out of the spaces created by the pillars, their progress through the exhibit is slowed, mirroring restricted access to healthcare, while also educating visitors on the range of people in need of healthcare before the passage of the Affordable Care Act. The exhibit continues to highlight the context of the Affordable Care Act with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who established Social Security and coverage for the elderly and the unemployed. Then, speaking of health care and an economic Bill of Rights during his State of the Union in 1944, President Truman advocated for national health insurance in 1948, following which President Lyndon B. Johnson established Medicare and Medicaid. The exhibit highlights the conscientiousness of the implementation of these important health care programs, echoing the strong support and opposition that the Affordable Care Act has garnered. The actions of these former presidents demonstrate that the actions taken by President Obama were not novel or foreign ideas, but had been discussed, debated, and refined over the previous century. The labyrinth concludes with pillars for the 1990s and the 2000s, with screens and text illustrating the continued debate around healthcare and health insurance immediately prior to Obama's campaign and subsequent election to the presidency. The wall on the far end of the room has a condensed timeline with the history of healthcare in the United States government, showing partisan and bipartisan actions taken. Visitors then encounter personal perspectives from patients, doctors, and insurance representatives both before and after the passage of the Affordable Care Act. These perspectives are separated according to category by 3 partitions. Each partition is equipped with a screen and area-specific speakers, playing testimonials from its respective group. Visitors can interact with the screens to browse through the available videos. They are also free to look through the binders on the counter, which contain additional written accounts and letters written to President Obama regarding the Affordable Care Act. Beyond the partitions are a series of infographics that visually depict healthcare costs during this period of time. A hospital bed covered in mock currency shows the high cost of healthcare before the Affordable Care Act, which pushed many U.S. citizens into personal bankruptcy. Located in an alcove at the end of this room, the How Would You Be Covered module is an interactive screen that presents visitors with a small number of yes-no general questions an insurance company pre-ACA would have asked and potentially used as grounds to deny coverage or increase premiums. Once the user has answered this initial set of questions, they'll be asked to pick a medical ailment ranging from a broken bone to a terminal illness, and will then be shown how much, adjusted to present-day value, it would have cost them. At this time, they will also be shown whether an insurance company would have covered them and at what cost. Influenced by Jenny Kidd's work, Interactives in the Social Museum, the aim of this interactive segment is primarily historical, to give visitors a more tangible and relatable idea of why healthcare was such a major issue in the first decades of the 21st century. Located before the hallway leading to the debate hall, on the far left is a bin filled with reproductions of large signs and buttons used in demonstrations around the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Each item available for display will be depicted on the opposite wall with details about its use, situating it within a specific event in time, and the motivations of the person or group who produced the material. The image of the item would have a QR code that visitors can scan to learn more about the specific event with access to a collection of news sources documenting the event. Individuals or groups can select the items that they would like to display in a photo and stand in front of a picture of the steps of Capitol Hill. Visitors can then learn more about President Obama's inauguration and have their picture taken behind the podium and backdrop of the inauguration as if they were really there. Visitors are encouraged to upload their photos, both of their general OPC visit and specifically from these displays, on social media using the OPC Southside hashtag. Continuing through the hallway, visitors are able to learn about the passage of the Affordable Care Act with displays on the initial debate and passage of the legislation, President Obama's signing of the legislation, adjudication of the Affordable Care Act in the courts, and finally an interactive display on states in the Affordable Care Act. The architecture of this hallway opens up, providing a sharp contrast to the maze-like area before the passage of the ACA. The end of the exhibit hallway opens up to the big, bold, and bright debate hall, providing a liberating release for visitors. With a seating capacity for 500, the debate hall is equipped for multiple purposes. For visitors to the exhibit, holograms can be played on demand and at scheduled times. Visitors can see President Obama speak at the signing of the Affordable Care Act, watch highlights from the presidential debates, and see other milestones of President Obama's legacy, such as key speeches, eulogies, and his inaugural address. After hours and during special events, the debate hall can be used for lectures, panel discussions, community meetings, and informational programs. Inspired by the architecture of John Ronan, the heat from the debate hall warms the soil in First Lady Michelle Obama's rooftop organic garden. The produce from this garden supplies the Organic Food Cafe on the second floor of the Obama Presidential Center. Visitors can come to the cafe from the debate hall on the first floor, or they can directly come from the bridge that links from the CTA station. The emphasis that both President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama place on healthy choices as being integral to overall health and well-being connects nicely with the Affordable Care Act exhibit, and in many ways serves as an extension of it. In the cafe, visitors can eat food that is healthy, organic, and sustainably grown. While enjoying their meal, visitors are able to interact with the waterproof touch screens embedded in the dining tables. The touch screens enable visitors to read information on the food they're eating, including the growing process, nutritional information, and recipes for many of the dishes served in the cafe. Visitors are also able to see social media streams that contain the OPC Southside hashtag and continue browsing content from museum exhibits. The garden and cafes serve as hubs for healthy living, educational programs for local schools, which will also be made available via the OPC website for schools around the United States and even the world to replicate and use within their own contexts. Thank you for exploring the Obama Presidential Center and the Affordable Care Act exhibit today. We look forward to your visit.
You approach the entrance of the immigrant exhibit of the Obama Presidential Center. Cesar Chavez, Hedy Lamarr, and Stokely Carmichael, and a number of other images of notable American immigrants and persons of immigrant descent greet you. Plaques respectively accommodate these images with achievements and information of the respective persons. Seeing this assortment of famous American personages and learning of their immigrant history sets the tone for this exhibit. The United States has been and will continue to be a nation of immigrants, and these immigrants have enriched American life in a multitude of ways. You pass through the entrance and are greeted by a display of President Barack Obama, the son of an immigrant. Here you learn about the president's experiences as the child of an immigrant. "Today, our immigration system is broken," begins a quote from the president, a quote which encapsulates his desire to reform the broken system. Flanking the display are kiosks, which offer an implicit attitude test. The test is composed of a series of rapid answer questions, which is meant to reveal one's true perceptions on immigration. The visitor, upon scanning their ticket, takes the test to learn about their attitudes. On the wall west of you is a chart and timeline depicting the immigrant history of the country. To the east is a display on other first-generation American presidents, as well as a timeline on the immigration legislation of the United States. In the middle of the room, the floor descends, and a holographic globe takes up the center, and beyond that, a model of the city of Chicago. You decide to go to the right and approach the portraits of the presidents. Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, and Chester A. Arthur are three of the 6 other first-generation presidents. With each portrait is an excerpt describing the experience of being a first-generation born American. This narrative reinforces the realization that immigrants have been a vital component of this country since its foundation. Cutting it across the middle, you descend towards the globe. An interactive panel surrounds the base of the rotating holographic world. Visitors are able to input where their family came from and when, the results appearing on the globe for visitors to see the multitude of origins. In conjunction with examining the personal immigration paths of visitors and their ancestors, you approach the Western Wall. On this wall is a physical chart and timeline depicting the nation's immigration flows throughout history. For example, you see a physical bar marking the immigration of the Irish to the United States. Within the timeline are interactive cubbies. On the cover of each cubby is a question or some other hook to interest the visitor. To learn more, the visitor lifts the lid to discover an artifact which answers the question. One example may include, in the 1920s, immigrants had to pay a tax of $12 to enter the country. What could $12 have bought at the time? And upon lifting the lid, the visitor sees a watch, a pair of shoes, or other objects, all with the purpose of demonstrating the cost of such a tax. Other cubbies may hold more personal artifacts, such as trinkets or mementos. Other than the cubbies, there are contemporary depictions or headlines of prominent immigrant groups. One example may be a mid-19th century caricature of an Irish immigrant taken from a newspaper. These artifacts of the various welcomes immigrants have experienced throughout the U.S.'s history make the visitor realize that the current anti-immigrant sentiments have long historical roots. After experiencing this timeline, you reach an interactive panel which comes out of the wall. Here one can learn in greater detail the histories and experiences of certain immigrant groups. A montage of photos cover the auto screen, and the visitor can select the immigrant group of their choosing. Before continuing to the next room, you turn inward to examine the model city that is just north of the holographic globe. This is a model of the city of Chicago, and it is also surrounded by interactive panels. This model highlights the immigrant neighborhoods and enclaves of the city, and the visitor can learn more of each area and the history of the people who lived in such neighborhoods. For example, one can learn more about the Polish immigrants in the 1910s. This portion ties the narrative of the immigrant exhibit to the city, which itself embodies the immigrant history of the country. After exploring to your heart's content, you decide to explore the remainder of the Eastern Wall. Here is a timeline of the country's immigrant legislation. Small summaries of major legislation dot the timeline, and the visitor can learn about the past responses to immigration and how these responses developed over time. Interspersing the timeline are small panels which visualize the impact of various legislation. One example may include a cartoon which encapsulates the impact restrictive quotas had on immigration into the country. This display ends with an interactive panel which mirrors the immigration panel on the western side of the room. This interactive panel highlights the views and policy the last few presidents had adopted. Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush are the presidents we focus on. Here you can explore debates, interviews, speeches, and the like to follow the path each president took in approaching immigration. This display highlights the complicated nature of immigration and roots the issue in a historical context, displacing any notion that it is a new phenomenon. You continue onward. Your eyes are drawn to the Western Wall, which focuses on the president's policy and aspirations. You read about his planned reforms for immigration, as well as his views on the subject. Items include a chart which displays the pathway to citizenship the DREAM Act would have created. A video display plays footage of the president's speeches and views. And in displays around you in the exhibit are physical artifacts of the president's reform efforts. For example, a collegiate cap and gown for an undocumented immigrant who has graduated from high school or college, the law diploma of the first undocumented immigrant to become a practicing lawyer, and the military fatigues of an army woman who served even though the government of the country she fights for has prevented her family from joining her in the U.S. Other items may include original drafts or documents of the president's legislation. After exploring the president's standpoint and views on immigration, you approach a section dedicated to the fight over immigration on the ground, particularly in the American Southwest. Audio of anti- and pro-immigrant rallies plays while you examine the posters and signs used at some of these rallies. Within this section is a screen for social media feed which displays the reactions of visitors to the exhibit. This allows the visitor to see themselves in the larger current of real reactions to immigration. A display bar guides your path as you read and learn about the arguments of all sides on the issue. For example, you read about the controversial Arizona Senate Bill 1070 and the rhetoric its proponents used in defending it. You also hear or read the testimony of persons who have lived alongside undocumented immigrants and their views on the issue. When the display bar ends, on your left is a group of clear columns filled with varying amounts of money. As you follow the path of the exhibit, you stop to look at the displays surrounding the column. These columns of cash visually represent the money spent in maintaining the current immigration system and the money brought in by immigrants themselves. You look at how much money was spent on the Border Patrol in 1993, $363 million, and compare it to 2013, $3.5 billion. The other columns show similar comparisons, such as the cost of deporting an undocumented immigrant then and now, or the budget to maintain other immigration enforcement agencies. In regards to the benefits of immigration, you see how much money undocumented immigrants currently pay in taxes and can compare it to how much estimates show that they will pay if they become naturalized citizens. As you walk around the columns, on your right you see a hanging display dedicated to the experiences of undocumented immigrants. You read or even hear about the reasons why individuals decided to immigrate to the United States, of what experiences they have had while in the U.S., of their hopes and dreams and how many jobs they worked and the like. As you continue following the path, after examining the columns and the narratives of the immigrants, you learn about the realities of current immigration trends. You see the states where the majority of undocumented immigrants settle and learn about the racialization of the term illegal alien, for you never hear about illegal immigrants coming from any Western countries. As you near the end of the swing, you find another set of stations for the implicit attitude test. The visitor once more scans their ticket to take the test. The hope is that the exhibit has informed the previously uninformed visitor and impacted their views. The visitor scans their ticket so as to confirm that the person who took the test at the beginning took it once more. Before following the ramp, you see one final display, this one dedicated to pathways to citizenship. Read not only about the president's proposed pathway, but also alternative proposals to citizenship. A pathway via military service, a pathway via taxes and fees, or a pathway of amnesty, are a few such ideas. The visitor is motivated to think about the variety of ways in which to approach the immigration issue, the hope being to spark an interest which will remain even after you leave the museum and return to day-to-day life. When you reach the top, you find yourself in an oval-like room overlooking the park and neighborhood. Directly in front of you, to the back of the room, are a set of booths, and you make your way over. These video booths, as you learn, are for you to record an immigrant narrative of yours or your family's. Following the wall north, you encounter a collection of screens. Here you hear about the immigrant narratives of fellow visitors, as well as the stories of former undocumented immigrants. You can interact with specific panels to hear these stories and to choose the next one. You are able to interact with the panel to choose a narrative from a certain region or country if you so desire. For example, you are interested about hearing a narrative of an immigrant from the Philippines, so you'll select the Philippines for the next story. Just as the exhibit began by presenting a number of notable immigrants and persons of immigrant descent who all contributed and helped create the United States as it is now, you are now presented with the narratives of your fellow peers who have all an immigrant background of some sort. This emphasizes the narrative that the United States is a country composed of immigrants, and makes you think about your own immigrant history. You explore the northern end of the room, which faces the neighborhood and park. This area is a multi-purpose area, which can be transformed for events such as talks, debates, or screenings. But for now, during a typical day, the space is open for the visitor to enjoy. Benches take up the space, and along the wall is a plaque with the citizenship oath. You're able to inspect the oath and reflect over what you as a natural-born citizen never had to make, or what you as a naturalized citizen had to make yourself. As you make your way towards the exit, you'll look out onto the exhibit below for one last look. Thank you very much.